The intervention had been Mom's idea. Family meeting at Richard's house, she texted that Thursday morning. We need to talk about your future, sweetheart. I knew what that meant. Another session where my successful relatives would gather to discuss my disappointing life choices and offer helpful suggestions for getting back on track. These meetings had become a quarterly tradition ever since I'd quit my consulting job 3 years ago. Uncle Richard's house in Bellevue was perfect for these gatherings. A sprawling modern mansion that screamed entrepreneurial success. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, and a view of Lake Washington that probably cost more than most people's entire homes. The kind of place that reminded everyone present that Richard had built something meaningful while others had not. I arrived precisely on time, carrying a bottle of wine I'd bought for $12 at the grocery store. Everyone else was already there. Mom, Dad, Aunt Susan, my older brother Michael, and my cousin Jennifer. They were seated in Richard's living room, drinks in hand, wearing the slightly awkward expressions people get before staging an intervention. Jessica. Richard boomed as I walked in. Perfect timing. We were just discussing your situation. My situation. That was the family euphemism for my complete lack of traditional success markers at age 31. No corporate job, no impressive salary, no clear career trajectory. Just a part-time gig doing bookkeeping for small businesses and what everyone assumed was an empty bank account. Sit, Richard continued, gesturing to the lone empty chair positioned directly across from everyone else. We want to help. I sat down and accepted the glass of wine Jennifer poured for me. That's very kind. Now, Richard said, settling into his usual leadership role, we've all been talking and we think it's time for some tough love. Michael leaned forward. Jess, you're 31. You can't keep drifting forever. Your brother's right, Dad added. When I was your age, I already had the hardware store, a mortgage, and 2 kids. You need stability. Aunt Susan nodded sympathetically. Sweetheart, we're worried about you. Living in that tiny apartment, working part-time jobs, no retirement savings. What happens when you get older? I sipped my wine and waited for Richard to take center stage. This was his show. The thing is, Jessica, Richard said, leaning back in his leather chair, success doesn't just happen. It requires discipline, vision, and hard work. I didn't build TechFlow Solutions by accident. TechFlow Solutions. Richard's enterprise software company that had grown from a garage startup to a major player in the industry. The company he'd been using as his primary example of entrepreneurial excellence for the past 4 years. Richard's absolutely right, Mom said proudly. Look what he's accomplished. From nothing to $100 million company. Actually, Richard corrected with false modesty, our latest valuation puts us closer to $300 million. The room buzzed with appropriate admiration. Richard had built something impressive and everyone knew it. TechFlow Solutions employed over 400 people, had offices in 5 cities, and was rumored to be preparing for an IPO. The point, Richard continued, is that real entrepreneurs don't need handouts. We bootstrap ourselves. We take risks. We sacrifice immediate gratification for long-term success. Jennifer nodded enthusiastically. Uncle Richard is so inspiring. He proves that with enough dedication, anyone can build something meaningful. That's exactly right, Richard said. Which brings us to you, Jessica. Here it comes. I've been thinking about your situation and I have a proposal. TechFlow is expanding our accounting department. I could create a position for you, good salary, full benefits, clear advancement track. It would give you the stability you need to start building a real future. The room was quiet, waiting for my response. This was a generous offer from a successful family member who was trying to help his struggling niece get her life together. That's incredibly kind of you, Richard. But, he said, sensing hesitation, but I'm not sure corporate accounting is the right fit for me. Michael sighed. Jess, you can't afford to be picky about fit. You need income. Your brother's right, Dad said. Sometimes you have to take jobs you don't love to build toward jobs you do love. The problem, Richard said, settling into lecture mode, is that you've never learned the discipline of entrepreneurship. Real entrepreneurs understand that success requires sacrifice. We don't have the luxury of only doing what we feel passionate about. Richard built TechFlow by working 18-hour days for 3 years, Aunt Susan added. No weekends, no vacations, just pure dedication. That's the difference between entrepreneurs and employees, Richard continued. Employees think someone owes them a paycheck for showing up. Entrepreneurs understand that you only get paid for creating value. I nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense. The harsh reality, Richard said, warming to his favorite topic, is that most people aren't cut out for entrepreneurship. They want the rewards without the risks. They want someone else to provide security while they pursue their hobbies. Like working part-time at nonprofits, Jennifer said helpfully. Exactly. Look, Jessica, there's nothing wrong with being an employee. Most people need the structure of a traditional job. The problem is when people pretend they're entrepreneurs while still expecting handouts. Handouts? I asked. Financial support from family, government programs, loans they can't repay, anything that lets them avoid the real consequences of their choices. Real entrepreneurs don't need handouts. We bootstrap ourselves. The room murmured agreement. Richard's philosophy was compelling and clearly successful. He'd built a massive company through pure determination and business acumen. The question, Richard continued, is whether you're ready to stop expecting handouts and start building something real. I think I understand. Good. So you'll consider the TechFlow position. I'll definitely think about it. Richard smiled. Excellent. I'll have HR prepare an offer letter. Starting salary would be $85,000, which is probably more than you've ever made. Actually, my investment income last year had been around $47 million, but I didn't think this was the right moment to mention that. That's very generous, I said instead. It's not generosity, Richard corrected. It's opportunity. I'm giving you a chance to prove yourself in a real business environment. The meeting continued for another hour with various family members offering additional advice about budgeting, career planning, and the importance of financial responsibility. Richard shared more stories about building TechFlow, emphasizing the themes of self-reliance and bootstrap entrepreneurship. I listened politely, occasionally asking questions that allowed Richard to elaborate on his business philosophy. By the end of the evening, everyone seemed satisfied that I'd received the guidance I needed to finally get my life together. I hugged everyone goodbye and drove home to my small apartment in Capitol Hill. Once inside, I poured myself a glass of wine, better wine than I'd brought to Richard's house, and opened my laptop. Richard's lecture about bootstrap entrepreneurship was interesting, considering that TechFlow Solutions had been built entirely with funding from anonymous investors. According to the company's financial records, which I reviewed regularly, TechFlow had raised capital through 3 funding rounds over the past 4 years. The seed round had provided $8 million in initial funding. Series A had added another $35 million. The recent Series B had brought in an additional $150 million, bringing total outside investment to $193 million. The lead investor in all 3 rounds was Cascade Ventures, a private equity firm that specialized in enterprise software companies. Cascade had provided the majority of TechFlow's funding and held a 67% ownership stake in the company. What Richard didn't know was that Cascade Ventures was a subsidiary of Pacific Capital, which was owned by Meridian Holdings, which was controlled by a trust I'd established 6 years ago. I was Richard's anonymous investor. I was the source of the $193 million that had built his entrepreneurial empire. The irony was perfect. Richard's entire business philosophy was based on the importance of self-reliance and bootstrap entrepreneurship, while his company was completely dependent on outside investment capital that he believed came from institutional investors. In reality, every dollar that had built TechFlow Solutions came from me, the family member he'd just lectured about needing to stop expecting handouts. I'd first identified TechFlow during their seed round, when Richard was pitching his enterprise software concept to venture capital firms. His technology was solid, his market analysis was thorough, and his business model was scalable. The fact that he was my uncle had made me more cautious about investing, not less. I'd conducted extensive due diligence to ensure the opportunity was genuinely attractive. But as TechFlow grew and Richard's lectures about entrepreneurial superiority became more frequent, the investment had taken on a different character. Richard had always been successful even before TechFlow. His previous company had been acquired for $30 million, giving him enough personal wealth to live comfortably without working. But TechFlow had made him genuinely wealthy, and wealth had amplified his natural tendency toward lecturing family members about their life choices. The bootstrap entrepreneurship speeches had started about 2 years ago, always delivered with the confidence of someone who'd proven his business philosophy through real-world success. Richard genuinely believed he'd built TechFlow through pure determination and smart decision-making. He didn't know that every major decision had been made possible by my capital. I opened my secure email and composed a message to my wealth management team at Pacific Capital. Please schedule a call regarding TechFlow solutions. Considering changes to our investment structure. The response came back within an hour. Available tomorrow at your convenience. Current position is $193 million across 3 funding rounds. Company performance remains strong per latest quarterly reports. Strategic review requested. I scheduled the call for 2 p.m., then spent the evening reviewing TechFlow's financial statements and market position. From a pure investment perspective, the company was performing well. Revenue growth was steady, profit margins were improving, and they were gaining market share in their target segments. Richard was, objectively, a competent CEO. He'd made smart strategic decisions, hired good people, and built a valuable company. The fact that he was using that success to lecture family members about self-reliance was annoying but separate from his business competence. The next afternoon I called my portfolio manager. "Miss Chin," Patricia Williams answered. "Thank you for making time. I understand you want to discuss TechFlow solutions. I'm considering liquidating our position." "The entire $193 million position? May I ask what's driving this decision?" "Strategic philosophical differences with management." "Regarding company direction?" "Regarding the source of their success." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "I'm not sure I understand." "The CEO has been making statements about bootstrap entrepreneurship and self-reliance that aren't consistent with the reality of how the company was funded." "Ah," Patricia said carefully. "Personal conflicts with family members can be challenging when they intersect with investment decisions." "What would liquidation look like?" "We have several options. We could sell our position to another institutional investor, though finding someone willing to take on $193 million in secondary shares would take time. Or we could exercise our liquidation preferences under the shareholder agreement. Which would mean demanding immediate return of invested capital plus accrued returns. Given TechFlow's current cash position and debt obligations, they'd be unable to meet that requirement. So the company would face bankruptcy. Almost certainly. They're profitable but not cash-rich enough to return $193 million immediately. They'd need to find replacement funding or liquidate assets. What about Richard's personal exposure? Patricia reviewed more documents. Mr. Peterson has personal guarantees on approximately $25 million in company debt. He'd also lose his equity stake, which is currently valued at around $98 million. So he'd go from multimillionaire entrepreneur to personally bankrupt. That's correct. I thanked Patricia and told her I'd get back to her with a decision. The rational part of my brain knew this was a bad financial decision. TechFlow was a solid company with good growth prospects. Richard might be annoying, but he was building real value and employing hundreds of people. Destroying the company would hurt innocent employees and customers, not just Richard. But the emotional part of my brain was tired of being lectured about handouts by someone whose success was entirely funded by my handouts. That evening Richard called. "Jessica, I wanted to follow up on last night's conversation. Have you thought more about the TechFlow position?" "I have," I said. "It's a generous offer." "I'm glad you think so. When can you start?" "Actually, I had a question about your bootstrap entrepreneurship philosophy." "Oh, what kind of question?" "Well, you mentioned that real entrepreneurs don't need handouts, that they bootstrap themselves. I was curious how that worked with TechFlow." "What do you mean?" "I mean, didn't you raise outside investment capital? I thought I read that the company had received funding from venture capitalists." Richard laughed. "That's different. That's strategic capital from sophisticated investors who understand the business. That's not a handout, that's a partnership." "I see. So taking money from investors isn't the same as taking handouts." "Completely different. Investors provide capital in exchange for equity and returns. They're betting on your vision and execution. Handouts are just free money with no expectations or accountability." "That makes sense. How much investment capital did TechFlow raise?" "I don't usually discuss specific numbers, but we've raised approximately $200 million across multiple rounds. That's impressive. And these investors, they just believed in your vision. Well, they also conducted extensive due diligence. They analyzed our technology, our market opportunity, our business model, our team. It's not like they just handed over money. They made a calculated investment based on our potential for returns. So they're expecting returns on their $200 million investment? Of course. That's how venture capital works. They provide growth capital, we build value, everyone wins. And if the company couldn't return their investment? Then we'd face serious consequences. Investors have liquidation preferences, board seats, significant control rights. It's not like borrowing money from family. These are sophisticated business relationships with real accountability. I see. So your success isn't really bootstrapped. It's built on outside capital. Jessica, that's not the same thing. Bootstrap entrepreneurship doesn't mean never taking investment capital. It means not depending on handouts or expecting other people to support your lifestyle while you figure things out. But isn't $200 million in investment capital a form of other people supporting your business while you figure things out? Richard was quiet for a moment. That's a very naive way to look at it. How should I look at it? Investment capital comes with strings attached. Accountability, performance expectations, fiduciary responsibilities. The investors aren't just giving me money, they're betting on my ability to generate returns. If I fail, I lose everything. And if you succeed, then everyone wins. The investors get returns, I build wealth, employees have jobs, customers get valuable products. That's the beauty of capitalism. That does sound like everyone wins, I agreed. Exactly. So will you consider the job offer? Actually, Richard, I have a confession to make. What kind of confession? I am one of your investors. Richard laughed. Jessica, that's not possible. Why isn't it possible? Because our investors are major institutional funds with hundreds of millions in assets under management. You work part-time doing bookkeeping. What if I told you I had other income sources? Then I'd ask what kind of income sources could possibly give you access to venture capital investment opportunities. The kind that come from managing a $2.8 billion investment portfolio through various holding companies and shell corporations. The line went quiet. Jessica, that's not funny. I'm not trying to be funny. I'm trying to explain that Cascade Ventures, your lead investor, is controlled by companies that I own. That's impossible. Why is it impossible? Because you live in a studio apartment and drive a 15-year-old Corolla. I like living simply. It helps me stay focused on what matters. Jessica, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. $193 million to be precise. Across your seed round, Series A and Series B funding. You can't, that's not. How would that even be possible? Stanford MBA, early investment in several tech companies that went public, strategic reinvestment of proceeds over 6 years. It's not that complicated. But you work part-time. You couldn't afford to contribute to Mom's birthday gift. I budget carefully. The $500 for Mom's gift wasn't in my monthly personal expenses budget. Jessica, if this is true, if you actually, why didn't you ever say anything? Why would I? You seemed so proud of building your business through bootstrap entrepreneurship. I didn't want to diminish your sense of accomplishment. But you let everyone, we've been treating you like someone who needs handouts. Richard was quiet for a long time. Jessica, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. If I'd known. If you'd known what? That I was wealthy? Would that have changed how you treated me? Well, I mean, it puts things in perspective. What kind of perspective? If you have that kind of money, then obviously you don't need career advice or job offers. But if I didn't have that kind of money, I would need to be lectured about bootstrap entrepreneurship? That's not. I was trying to help. You were trying to help someone you thought was unsuccessful. Now that you know I'm not unsuccessful, suddenly I don't need help? Jessica, I don't know what to say. Here's what I'm going to say, Richard. Tomorrow, Cascade Ventures will be exercising our liquidation preferences and demanding immediate return of all invested capital. What does that mean? It means TechFlow has 30 days to return $193 million or face bankruptcy proceedings. Jessica, no. Please. You can't do that. Why not? It's my investment capital. According to your philosophy, I should be able to make strategic decisions about my money without worrying about handouts to other people. That's different. That would destroy the company. It would destroy a company that was built entirely on what you call handouts from family members. Jessica, please. I'm begging you. Are you asking for a handout, Richard? I'm asking for understanding. For family consideration. The kind of family consideration you showed me when you lectured me about being a failure who expects handouts. I was wrong. I was completely wrong. You were wrong about my financial situation. Were you wrong about your philosophy? What do you mean? Do you still believe that real entrepreneurs don't need handouts? Or do you now think that handouts are acceptable when they come from family members who love you? Richard was quiet. I'll take that as an answer, I said. The liquidation papers will be filed tomorrow morning. Jessica, wait. Please. I hung up. Within 2 hours, my phone was buzzing with calls from other family members. Mom, Dad, Michael, Jennifer. All of them had heard from Richard, all of them wanting to understand what was happening. I let them all go to voicemail, then opened my laptop to draft the final authorization for Patricia. By Monday morning, TechFlow Solutions would be facing a liquidity crisis that would destroy Richard's bootstrap entrepreneurship empire. The $300 million valuation would disappear, along with Richard's reputation as a self-made entrepreneur. And I would go back to my part-time bookkeeping job, because I genuinely enjoyed helping small business owners organize their finances. The difference was that now Richard would know that his lecture about handouts had been delivered to the person who'd been providing them all along. Just like I'd told Patricia, the company would collapse exactly as predicted.